Crystal. Hi.
Hello.
I'm so excited to be here with Crystal Cook, motivational speaker, SEL speaker, author, therapist. Crystal is releasing her second children's book. And Crystal, one of the things that I love about your books is all the lessons that you sort of very conveniently and sneakily put in your stories for all the ages. And one that really stood out to me was this idea of intuition and the different types of fears. So I figured we would talk about your book and talk about the lessons in your book.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like the books are an onion layer of different lessons. So you can read it once and pick something out and read it again and pick something else out. And the second book is primarily about fear. And we all have fear. I mean, that's universal. And we have fear that protects us from danger, right? If you're walking down the street and a bus is charging at you, the fear prompts you to move. And we also have fear that holds us back. And that is the self-limiting beliefs. I'm afraid to get in front of people and speak. I'm afraid of, going up to that person I think is really nice looking and saying, "Hi, my name is Crystal," and that holds us back. And nothing dangerous is going to happen, but it holds us back. And I wanted a book for children so that they could learn how to manage the both types of fear, to understand the difference, because there's a difference. And sometimes it's not so obvious. But as I was writing the book, I thought, oh my goodness, what I don't want is for children to grow up and ignore what I call the spidey sense. When something doesn't appear like, hey, there's not a bus rushing towards me. And maybe I'm with this person that I'm supposed to trust, because if you look at the statistics, the majority of sexual assault is by someone that we know and that we trust, whether you're a child or a grown-up. And there's that spidey sense that I think especially children have. I think as we get older, we still have it, but maybe we ignore it. But children and teens really, really have it. And I didn't want them to ignore that feeling of something feels off here. So I wove that into the story in the context of animals having that instinct.
That spidey sense of something feels off, something's not quite, yeah. Do you have any advice on how we lean into that spidey sense? How do we sharpen those skills?
I think that's such a good question. For me, I think definitely meditation helps, because meditation, if we can start our day and end our day with some meditation, and maybe meditation for someone is praying, maybe it's doing yoga, maybe it's going for a walk, but for me, it's sitting silently. And that allows everything to be centered. Maybe you're going for a walk, but you're not going for a walk listening to your music and having a phone call conversation. It's going for a walk and noticing all the sounds around you, being very mindful. That's a big buzzword, but being mindful is being in that moment and slowing down. And when we can do that, we really get in touch with our bodies. So like for me, when I have that spidey sense, it's in my gut, like something feels off. And when I ignore it, I always regret it. And I don't know if you have that opportunity, Jocelyn, right? Where it's like, dang it, I knew that person was gonna like stab me in the back, or I knew that guy that I was gonna date was gonna do this. I knew it, but I didn't listen to my gut. And really, when you can get in tune with your body and that feeling, your heart races just a little bit more, or there's this feeling of discomfort, because our minds talk us out of it. It's like, well, this person is really nice, or the situation seems really legit. And so we talk ourselves out of it, but there's that feeling. So if we can really get to a place where we're paying attention to our bodies and noticing like something feels off.
So developing, yeah, I guess distinguishing that difference between like the thinking, maybe overthinking versus the feeling. And so really it sounds like, well, to recap what you said, one way that we might develop our intuition or our spidey senses, finding those moments of quiet, observing the world around you, mindfulness, and feeling into the body versus being in your head and deep in the thought of the thing.
And it's not exact. It's really cloudy, isn't it? It's like we don't really, sometimes we don't know until after the fact. Like, dang, I knew. Or, sometimes I'm sure I've been wrong before, where I've sensed something and went with what I sensed, and maybe I was wrong. But I think just giving yourself the time to gather more information. 'Cause I don't want us to distrust everybody or judge people because they may look a certain way, because it's nothing to do with how people look at all. It's just a feeling that you get by taking the time to pause and gather more information. Like, for instance, if you're in college, if you get that spidey sense, this is what I always told my teens, don't go out alone with that person. Go with a group of people until you feel more comfortable. Make sure that you're safe while you're gathering more information.
Yeah, a little bit of common sense and a little bit of listening to your gut, tuning in, not ignoring it, right? I love how you have such a simple, I know this is your whole messaging, simple strategies for a complex world. But I do love how your books are packed with these complex ideas, these big life lessons, and yet you write in your books in such a way where it's so approachable and easy to comprehend. I know that your books, they're technically they're children's books, but they're really for all ages. Can you speak to, I don't know, the making of the books and what inspired these lesson-packed stories?
I would like to say that I'm clever and I'm brilliant, but I'm really not. If we go back to being quiet, I think, I don't know, you're an artist. I don't know if this is what happens with you when you're creating art, but when we're quiet and we meditate or we pray or we ask for guidance, sometimes things just kind of come in, like almost like I feel like there's this thing coming from the sky and booming into my head and words are flying out and I'm literally trying to catch them. Like, don't fly away. I'm catching all these words and putting them in a bag so then I can take them out and write it down. And it feels like it's inspired by something much more wiser than me, because I'm really not that clever. And I don't even really kind of know what I'm doing. That's why I have so many people that help me. But I like things to be simple. I think we overcomplicate, and I do too. We overthink things. We overcomplicate them. And I used to tell my students, my teens, like, you're catastrophizing. Let's just bring it down, because things can be not easy, but simple. Mm-hmm. And, there's so much on just deep breathing, taking a minute to pause and breathe. And then that takes us out of that sympathetic nervous system to the parasympathetic nervous system where you have access to your brain.
I hear you. I hear you, and I'm going to challenge you a little bit. I disagree. I think you are brilliant, and super clever with your words. But as you describe that image of ideas, of inspiration, sort of storming around you and coming to you, and you sort of grabbing them, it reminds me of the book Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. This idea that ideas are these like living things that come to you, and so you come to this agreement of, will you execute that idea, and in turn that idea will inspire you. And so you're kind of reminding me of that a little bit. Would you say that that's kind of has been your experience?
Yeah, I think so. And maybe that's where the visual came from. I know I read it in someone's book about the words and you're trying to capture them, and it might have been that, but absolutely kind of like, and it did feel like that for me, is as I work with teens and kids and families, there's, regardless of where we're at in the world right now with so much conflict, as humans, there's a common thread for every single human, that we've had the exact same experiences in different ways, right? We have all been afraid.
Yeah.
We have all been judged. We have all judged someone else. We've all tried to help a friend in need, and we've all needed help. And so I wanted to take all of these common elements and somehow put them in a book, but it wasn't really that clear and linear when it came to me. It was just like, oh, okay, I think I'll write. That sounds like fun. So I took a lot of writing classes. And then someone said, you should write children's stories. Like, it must be because I'm so immature and playful, but I'll go with that.
I'll say playful.
Yeah. And then, and so, yeah. And I think I just kind of forgot what your question originally was, but it was just really wanting to have a platform for kids and even adults, really. I mean, adults fear things too. Adults judge. Adults are judged. We, as humans, we continue to have these same things that we are faced with all of the time. And I didn't necessarily intend for adults to resonate with it, but that's the common theme that I get from people, is this is for adults too. And we all love pretty pictures, and the illustrator is fantastic.
Yes, yes. And you're absolutely right. Fear is such a universal experience. And I love your distinction between fear that protects you, that serves you really, and fear that holds you back. And so I guess I'm curious if you have any advice on how we might learn to identify or differentiate the two.
When it's gray, right? And in the story, I talk about this because the animals are learning. Like, okay, so this is, we call it in the book, make believe fear and real fear. But and the make believe fear is what I, break it down, FEAR, false evidence appearing real. And like, well, how do we know? Because the animals brought up a really good example. Like when we go to veterinarian, like that hurts. Like they're, doing things to us is not fun and it's painful. So if it's something, because as a child, I hated going to the doctor. I like the dentist because I got happy cast. But the doctor I didn't like going to, and it was scary. Those are when they gave you shots. And I think this for all children, it's terrifying. So just, trying to figure out if it hurts and it's scary, is it still safe? And so maybe we can check in with each other. And I think as people, we often do that, don't we? It's like, did you get kind of a weird feeling from that experience? I've had that with my friends before. It's like, something feels off. What do you think? And so I think checking in with each other is helpful. Like, well, Crystal, I think that I understand why you thought that, but truly, let me give you a little bit of backstory about that particular person and why you might be getting this certain vibe from them. And I'm just making this up as an example. Or, hey, I'm afraid to go live overseas, live in Europe. It's terrifying. It's like, go for it. You'll be fine. Or I can understand, because like there's things that are really, legitimately scary. And so having our trusted friends that we can check in with is helpful. Or just saying, you know what, go, what I do some of the kids I work with is like, I'm going to kick you off that cliff. Not literally, I'm not taking them to a cliff and kicking them off. It's like, I know this is scary and you got this and you can do it and it's going to feel uncomfortable, but you can do it. Sometimes you just have to have that makes you.
Yeah. I often think of that as touching our edges or surpassing our edges. It is tricky though, there are moments where that question of, okay, it hurts and it's uncomfortable, but is it still safe? And so leaning on your trusted friends and family members to give you some feedback, it feels like a really, really good piece of advice. What about identifying who are the people that we can trust, that are going to be sound and wise and sort of guide us in the right direction? And I know I'm asking you really big questions, difficult questions.
Those are great questions, though. I know because, so we'll take children, for example. Children are told, go to your parent or go to this person. Oftentimes with children, the person that they're supposed to trust are not someone that's safe. It just because of the work that I did. I'm not saying universally all children can't trust the people that they're supposed to be safe, but there are times when that's not safe. And so really finding in your life who is safe, who is consistent, and that for me is the biggest piece. When you have someone that is inconsistent with you when you're walking on eggshells, that's to me is not safe. It's a clue, right? So sometimes they're angry, sometimes they're happy. You never know. They're not consistent. So that wouldn't be a trusted advisor. for me, it's some like, you're kind of my trusted advisor because you're no nonsense. You're always honest. You're always straightforward. You don't beat around the bush. I know that when I go to you for something, I'm going to get a concrete, honest answer. And you're not someone that gets taken advantage of. So I look to those people as, if it's so, and I got lovely friends who are so kind and lovely and giving that they get taken advantage of. It can often be a doormat. They may or may not be a good person for me to ask because they tend to see the world, I guess, maybe with rose-colored glasses, or they see everyone as wonderful. And that's a beautiful quality. At the same time, if I'm feeling a little unsure, it helps me to be with someone who's not paranoid and doesn't hate the world, that's just kind of balanced. So
Balanced.
Mhm.
Balanced. I love that. So it's not necessarily just about trusting those that are always kind, but instead looking for people who are kind, who are consistent, and who are balanced in their approach. Not too paranoid, not too rosy, balanced.
Mhm.
Yeah. Tell us about your book.
Well, this has been a fun book. It's longer, so it's the thing with my books is they don't fit in a box. I'm not a teacher. I've worked with children. I have many teacher friends, and I have a teacher consultant helping me with this book. And one of the things that she has said is something that's a heartburn for some people is that it's not in a box. It's not specific. It's not for, ages 5 through 7 or 8 through 10. Can be from, I've read these books from, 3-year-olds all the way to grown-ups. And you modify for the 3-year-olds, but still the pictures are so beautiful. The illustrations are that Kat created, and you chunk them up. And it's interesting because I think I have never fit in a box ever in my life. And so it would make sense that the books I create wouldn't necessarily fit in a box. I think it could be a little bit of something for everybody at any time, but it's not going to be that one specific thing that you need for maybe, a socially learning lesson for kindergarten about anger. It's not going to be that niche down. It's, what Paige talks about is literature. It's characters that they're complex characters, even though it's a children's story, that's complex characters. You really got to get into their personalities and their experiences. And so with literature, if you think back to like Winnie the Pooh or the Velveteen Rabbit, it's those types of stories in the children's format.
Yeah, and I love that you brought up Winnie the Pooh because I hadn't made that connection before until now that you said that. But your books do remind me of that sort of tender, but also really realistic life lessons, quality that Winnie the Pooh stories, I think, really brought up when I was a kid, when I watched the cartoons and read the books. I think you've done such a beautiful job at creating books that somehow, some way do lend themselves to little kids and are still deeply entertaining and thought-provoking for adults. And so I don't know what your secret magic sauce is and how you managed to do that, but you absolutely have.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we're talking about the book and we haven't even mentioned the name. This is Braveheart Gracie and the powerful but also powerless vacuum monster. And so it's a really giggly, sort of silly story when you kind of look at it at a surface level, but then once you get into it, and like you said, you get into the complex personality of the different characters, you can really appreciate like, oh, there's a lot going on over here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And when I think back to like the Winnie the Pooh characters, those characters were so rich and complex, right? That we even describe people as a Tigger or an Eeyore, right?
Yes.
And the same thing with the characters. And as I would go through them and work with Paige, she'd be like, you know, what is Gracie's voice? What is Charlie's voice? And then working with Daniela, the other editor, would be like, okay, this line here, we need to rework it a little bit to make it fit more to that character's voice. And so it was so helpful to have that team approach. And I also wanted to put in there that so much of our fears we make bigger. And, you know, we breathe life into our fears because we focus on them. But also when we can change our perspective on something, everything changes. Like, for instance, my perception of you could be, God, Jaslyn's like so mean because she says these things that are not nice. Like, she tells me like, your videos are really like stilted, and do another one because this is not working. And like, God, she's so critical and so mean. Like, that could be a perception, right? Or I could look at it from the other side, is like, goodness, I've got someone who is willing to just say it like it is and tell me, do not put that out there to the world. All right. So this is a silly example, but it's two perceptions, right? I could see you as someone who's not kind and rude and not supportive, or I can see you as someone who's like, thank goodness she's got my back.
I mean, that is such a hilarious and perfect example. I think it goes back though to that question of how do we know who we can trust? And I think for me, at least, so much of it is energy. So much of it is picking up on, I mean, you talked about this, the feeling, right? Do I feel like this person has my best interests at heart? Do I feel that they're coming from a malicious, jealous, foggy or nasty place? Or do I feel that they're coming from a loving and supportive place, even when they're not telling me what I want to hear?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That's a good point. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So for those that are curious about you, your work, can you talk to us a little bit about you? I am putting you on the spot.
Putting me on the spot, yeah. So I'm getting into the schools to do these books, because what I'm finding is that the kids find things in the books that I never knew were there, that's probably a conversation for another day. So I'm doing that. And I also do online therapy, which I never in my life thought I would ever want to do online therapy because I'm such an in-person person. But after COVID, people like it and it's convenient, and it allows me the freedom to be anywhere and provide the therapy services. And so I do that as well. And then I do workshops. Once a month, I do a free workshop. And then once a month, every 6 weeks, I do a group paid workshop, where one was on goal setting and goal getting. The one coming up is on procrastination. So it's just, I would say skills, a lot of skills for people. The workshops are, and then the therapy just depends on the person.
Yeah, and I'm going to come back to your whole mission, right? Providing simple strategies for this complex world. I love that that's at the heart of everything that you do. And I love how consistent you are about that, because through your therapy, through your social emotional learning workshops in the schools, through your speaking engagements, yes, you have these different things that you offer, but the common thread among it all is this idea of providing simple strategies for this complex world. I guess for anybody who is curious to have you go to their school, to speak at their event, you're such a wealth of knowledge for those simple strategies. And that's not just applicable to young kids, to adults as well. Yeah. Your book is coming out soon in April, Braveheart Gracie and the Powerful, Powerless Vacuum Monster. I guess as we wrap up, I want to invite folks to, go to your website at crystalcook.com, where they can sign up for your upcoming free workshop. You're discussing atomic habits, right?
Mm-hmm. Right. Which I love it because he simplifies things. And I love that about his book. It's like, oh, okay, I can do this. He chunks it down to make it simple. So yeah, we'll talk about the gems that were in that story.
Yeah, I really appreciate how your workshops, even if you haven't read the book, you can attend the workshop and get the gems, the little nuggets from the book and the big highlights. And then with your upcoming group, the procrastination elimination, is there anything you can tell us about that?
Yeah, for sure. I feel like, well, it goes back to fear, really. Procrastination, I think we beat ourselves up when we procrastinate. And if you're an entrepreneur, I think sometimes we battle with that more because we don't have a structured set schedule. If you go to a regular job, things are structured for you more. But that doesn't mean that when you get home, you don't procrastinate on certain things. And so the thing with procrastination, though, we beat ourselves up about it and we tell ourselves these things like, I'm so lazy, I'm such a loser, I'm not successful, blah, blah, blah. All of those mean things. But the truth is, procrastination doesn't mean any of that. We procrastinate because it's a coping mechanism at one time that kept us alive. It ties into that fear that we have. And so if we can learn strategies to help us not procrastinate, then it just becomes this, loop, this feedback loop, because then we get more rewarded, the more we, bust through those things that we procrastinate on, we're getting more accomplished. And so then it becomes this positive reinforcement.
Gosh, as a master procrastinator over here, a lot of what you're saying is so resonating with me. Crystal, thank you so much for hanging out, for sharing. I want to share for anybody watching that Crystal has a ton of blogs and resources and events and workshops and amazing things on her website. And her book is coming out really, really soon in April. So crystalcook.com. That's where you can join her newsletter. Is there anything else that you want to add?
No, I would just say Crystal, CRISTAL.com, because just so that if you do CRYSTAL, you're going to get someone else.
Thank you for that. Yeah. And I'll make sure.
No, I don't have any. This is fun. And I appreciate everyone that hopped on to give us your time today.
I'll make sure to add the link as well. So just look for it. And until next time.
Yeah.
Thank you, Crystal. Thank you,
Bye.
everybody.